give more of a historical context to multiculturalism, giving a history of immigration or a deep history of slavery, of enslaved people in this country. And it's part of the regular curriculum. It's part of the textbooks.
Right. Now, speaking of textbooks, because I know that we're running out of time, I want to go to something. I want to show you a difference in the way textbooks, and some of you are in education and psychology, and you're studying. I compared 3 textbooks that are used for history, and it talks about Rosa Parks. In the first one, it says that Rosa Parks was tired. How many of you know that story? That was it? Her feet hurt, she was tired, and this thing just happened. I know it's a lie. Okay, so then we'll go to another textbook example, and it gives a little more information, and it talks about the fact she refused to ride the buses. They planned to keep up, but it wasn't because she was tired. It doesn't even tell you that she was an activist. She was she had desegregated. She had taken students when it was still segregation laws on the books. She took black students into areas, into see exhibits where blacks were not allowed. They don't tell you that. They just tell you her feet hurt and she was tired and she didn't want to get up on the bus. She was an organizer. Her people, her husband never traveled without a gun. Some of you think that, but there are people in the South, wonderful, wonderful people who resisted and continued. So the thing I'm pointing out in this, and I know I'm rushing it, is that as teachers, those of you who are going to be working with students, that when you read these textbooks, I was primarily a history teacher, you want to look into what is being said, because you can get a totally different picture. This bus boycott just happened. No, it didn't just happen. There was strategy and planning in place. And there were people who had been working on that for a long time. And so it seems as though, oh gee, what happened? Black people just blew up. What happened? I don't know. What's wrong with them? It wasn't like that at all. And you need to know that. And I really focus that to educators to look into the studies and present it, even if the book, and that's again, these books are not always accurate. Look into that and present that information so that you see the resistance, the proactiveness of all people. It is not just out of the blue that it happened.
I'd like to mention the way that we deal with Columbus Day and Thanksgiving in relation to Native peoples.
Right.
It is, I mean, I get crazy every September because the Nina, the Pinta, the Santa Maria, there's no talk about genocide. There's no talk about exploitation of the land. And the same with Thanksgiving. There's no history of who they call Squanto. Squanto was the name given him by the Europeans.
Right.
His name was Tisquantum. And as teachers, we have a responsibility to teach the children what really went on.
Right.
Well, you know, you might say, well, it's really hard to teach kids about genocide. If you really want to teach them, you will find a way, because they deserve to know. And that's contributing to the perpetuation of racism.
Okay, real fast, and this we're going to close out on code words. Some words that are,
Well, can you go past that one?
Oh, language, yeah, we'll pass. Language is not neutral. And that's something to just keep in mind. Language is never neutral. Language forms and shapes what is loaded. And I think many of us are seeing this, certainly in this presidential election, like that one over there.
Somebody talked about Obama's teeth. Did anyone hear that yesterday? They said he had a nice smile. He could speak really well, and he had nice teeth. But Chris Matthews set him straight. Even the word race is a code word, as far as I'm concerned, because when you say, well, yeah, we have a problem with race or racist, what they really mean is racism. Don't say race, because race in itself is not a problem. The fact that we look different and our lives are different, that's not the problem. The problem is racism. So I get a little nuts over that. Well, how are these words let's take slave and enslaved. A slave implies a state of being. That maybe you're born a slave. That it just
It objectifies.
It objectifies it, but enslaved, because we get out of the passive voice and we come into the active voice. Something happened. Something happened. Some action happened to create a person who is enslaved.
A slave is a thing, but an enslaved person is a human being. So people were enslaved. And as long as we're teaching in school about the slaves, there is no humanity there. They become objects.
And there's no
They were
agent.
people. They were children. I saw the shackles that were brought up from the Henrietta, the ship that sunk off the coast. And the shackles were this big. Because, and I mean, it drove me kind of crazy because those were children. Those were babies because they're easy to capture. So when you see that, you say, and they weren't slaves, those were children. Those were human beings that were being taken. Same thing with, what's the difference between a massacre and a victory?
It depends on whose side you're on. Gang and fraternity, something that Russell Simmons referred to. A gang and a fraternity. A group of people who are together for a purpose.
A tribe and an ethnic group. And when you say tribe, right away, you know who we're talking about.
Cherokee.
Or somebody of color.
Or African.
We're never talking about Europeans when we say the tribe, but they were tribes. The tribes, I mean, the Goths, the Vandals. Come on. The Saxons.
The Saxons.
All right.
The barbers.
But see,
the barbarians.
You're right. And that's where these words came from. Rebels and freedom fighters. Won't even go there.
Yep. Well,
Patriots and terrorists.
Oh.
Who said, oh?
Well, I mean, it's self-explanatory,
Yeah.
but you know, seeing these words in opposition is kind of interesting.
Okay, so
sniper and sharpshooter,
yeah.
Collateral damage and loss of life.
Yeah.
The officer's bullet killed the suspect versus the suspect
Was
shot
shot.
by an officer. We're using, they're here.
Yeah, they're up.
Oh, telephone solicitation and courtesy call. I had to put that one in. Okay.
All right.
Do we have code words here too?
Yeah, we did that.
No. At risk. Minority is a code word.
Yeah, it's a code word.
But guess what? Pretty soon, people who look like me are going to be the minority in about 35 or 40 years. So that word needs to change.